There are a significant number of governor's races happening in the 2026 midterms, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at each of the governor's races and talk about how they might go in the 2026 midterms, whether they go to the Republican or Democratic Party. We're going to look at who has the best opportunity coming out of this to hold more governorships, really. So, for starters, let's take a look at some of the states that we consider safe Democrat states. So we're talking about states like California, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, so on and so forth. So if we look at all of these states, we're going to have these as pretty solid victories, over 15 percentage points for the Democratic Party. If we look at a state like Pennsylvania, I also consider it a safe Democratic state. Josh Shapiro, a very popular governor in the state of Pennsylvania, performing well, is going to do well there, and ultimately, in my opinion, win this race by over 15 percentage points. Josh Shapiro will. A state like Maine, though, a little closer of a race, so we'll talk about it later in the video. But yeah, at this point, I think these are the states that I would say overall have the best chance of going to Democrats. We'll also put Minnesota in there, according to VoteHub's tally. So, with that said, let's take a look at some of those Republican states. So, we're looking at states, of course, that Trump won in the 2024 election by a pretty significant margin. We're looking at states like Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma. But some of these states are actually going to be a little closer than maybe some people expect. I believe Vermont also, we fully expect Phil Scott to win that race by over 15 percentage points. 30 if you listen to VoteHub. New Hampshire, a little bit of a different conversation there. We'll talk about that with the incumbent governor there in just a moment. So with all of these states, I think these are the ones that we characterize as safe Republican and safe Democrat. I'm sorry if I have messed something up here, but I think at this point, that's where we are standing. So with all of that said, let's take a look at, for starters, some of the states that are more likely to go to the Republicans or more likely to go to the Democrats, but not in that safe margin. So for starters, I'm going to take a look at the state of Michigan. Michigan is a state that Jocelyn Benson is going to be running against John James. I fully expect Jocelyn Benson to perform well here, even though some people are skeptical on Abdul El-Sayed winning the Senate race in Michigan. I still think Jocelyn Benson wins this by over 5 percentage points, which is what that margin comes to. So Democrats win Michigan, that likely margin there. So likely in the state of Michigan. Another state that I also want to look at on this level is going to be the state of Arizona. Katie Hobbs running a pretty good campaign there, a lot different than her campaign 4 years ago against Andy Biggs, not the best candidate for Republicans here. We expect, based off the VoteHub average margin at this point, that Katie Hobbs ends up winning this by about 9.3%, putting that in that likely margin as well. With that said, let's take a look at the state of Maine. Maine is one that we believe will go to the Democrats by about 11 percentage points. Also, again, putting that in that likely margin. And I think this is going to close out the Democrats on the likely margin of races for Democrats in governorships. So with that said, let's take a look at some of the Republican seats. So these are going to include races like Kansas, which I think may actually get closer as time goes on. But at this point, we're looking at about a 7.5 percentage point according to VoteHub. I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually more than this on my personal prediction, maybe 8-9%. But Cindy Holscher, a very strong Democratic candidate who actually has an opportunity to win this race, but right now, Republicans still a favorite in the state of Kansas. Similar situation in the state of Texas. Fully expect Greg Abbott to win this race at this point by over 5 percentage points, but it'll be interesting if James Tallarico continues to poll really well for Democrats on the Senate level, if that can help the Democrats perform well in the governor's race and defeat Greg Abbott. But right now, definitely on that likely margin, probably somewhere about 9%, 10% in favor of the Republicans there. Another state I want to take a look at is the state of Florida. We fully expect Byron Donalds to be that Republican nominee and ultimately win this race. The guess is about 7%. I think it's actually going to be more than that, probably 8 or 9%. But I wouldn't be surprised if this race begins to slim up as as the months go on heading into November, where Byron Donalds may actually not be the strongest candidate looked upon in the governor's race. But right now, 7% according to VoteHub. I think maybe even an 8-9% is what we're looking at. And ultimately, Byron Donalds sitting at over 5%, putting that in that likely Republican margin. Another state of South Carolina, Alan Wilson, fully expect him to win probably by 10%, like VoteHub says, but right now it could really be anywhere between 10 to 12%. I definitely do not think this is a safe Republican state, which puts it over 15%. But right now, Republicans performing really well there, and no surprise, of course, but not as well as maybe they want to. So South Carolina, Alan Wilson winning that race, maybe 10, 12%, putting that in that likely Republican margin. Another state to look at is going to be the state of New Hampshire. Kelly Ayotte is running for re-election in the state of New Hampshire, ultimately expected to win by about 10 percentage points, maybe even 11 in this race for New Hampshire governor. And I fully agree with that likely Republican margin in the New Hampshire governor's race as well. So with that said, that may close out the Republican margins of victory for the governorships on the likely margin. I think it will. The states that we have left, I think, are going to be much closer than that. So with that said, let's move over and start talking about the lean Republican and lean Democratic states. So these are states that we expect anywhere from a percentage point to 5% for the Democrats or for the Republicans. So for starters, I want to take a look at the state of Nevada. This one is real interesting, and ultimately at this moment, Republicans are leading here with incumbent Joe Lombardo winning this race against Aaron Ford. Joe Lombardo won this race 4 years ago, and ultimately is a very strong Republican candidate across the state of Nevada, has an opportunity to win re-election here. At this point, I would say that is probably going to be the case. That's going to be in that lean Republican margin. So, that said, let's move down to Alaska, a race that's interesting, but also going to be important here. So we know that we have Democrats having the opportunity to win a Senate race in the state of Alaska. A little bit of a different conversation for that governor's race, but still interesting in the fact that Democrats may still make this race competitive. And we'll have to see as time goes on if it's really as competitive as maybe it's expected to be at this point. But right now, I would disagree with this margin according to VoteHub. I think it's probably more of 4, maybe even closer to 5. I should have put that in the likely Republican margin, but at this point, I'm going to go with lean Republican for the state of Alaska as well. Probably somewhere around 4-5% would be the guess there. So, with that said, we have narrowed it down to 4 states left. So, for starters, I want to talk about the state of Iowa. If you watched my video on the Iowa races, both for Senate and governor, we've talked a little bit about this already, but ultimately we haven't talked about it in today's video, which is focusing on all the governor's races. Rob Sand, a very strong Democratic candidate who's expected to win by about 3.5 percentage points right now. I'm a little skeptical of that. I think it may be closer to 2.5. But still, Rob Sand winning that as a Democrat on that lean Democrat margin. So that has a flip for Democrats in the state of Iowa. Another state to look at is going to be the state of Wisconsin. This one's interesting because we have a primary coming up where there is a strong Democrat candidate who is more progressive and actually may risk the Democrats' chance of winning this election in November, but we're going to have to wait and see how that progresses at this point in time with the facts that we know about and not knowing for sure who the Democratic nominee is going to be, and also with this polling stuff that happened across Michigan where Abdul El-Sayed was expected to win by a much larger margin than he ended up winning by. A more progressive candidate's we're going to have to be more skeptical towards them in primaries going forward. So at this point, I also believe Democrats still favored to win the Wisconsin governor's race by that lean margin there in Wisconsin as well. That said, let's move over to the state of Ohio, one that I actually disagree with VoteHub's tally here. They have Vivek Ramaswamy winning this race by 0.2 percentage points, but I actually disagree with that. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy actually is going to lose this race. In fact, I think he's going to lose it by a little bit more than what they say he's going to win it by. So I think Amy Acton may win this race, but probably under a percentage point across the state in Ohio. But nonetheless, Democrats get a win in Ohio in that tilt Democratic margin, and that's going to be significant, a significant flip if that develops. But at this point, I think Vivek Ramaswamy not the strongest candidate for Republicans across the state, and I think he ultimately loses. Final race I want to talk about is the state of Georgia. Jon Ossoff is running for re-election for that Senate seat, and I think that he's going to help Keisha Lance Bottoms, the Democrat for governor, be pulled over the top. Right now, she's, according to VoteHub, she's up 2 percentage points to Rick Jackson, and I agree. I think this is a lean Democratic state as well. So with that said, this brings the Democrats to 26 governor's mansions and the Republicans to 24. With all of that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree or do you disagree with any of these? I love reading through your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys again so much for watching.